Pack your desk and surrender your keycards by noon, Gerald. Julian sneered, sliding a zero severance termination notice across the mahogany conference table. Your position is redundant. I didn't raise my voice. I simply signed the notice, picked up my pen, and pointed out the window at the 120,000 square foot flagship complex. You just terminated the sole leaseholder of this entire property, Julian. Hand over the master keys. To understand how a 36-year-old corporate golden boy managed to lock himself out of his own $45 million retail distribution hub, you have to go back 18 years. I started at Apex Retail Group in 2008 as a 34-year-old commercial real estate analyst. Back then, Apex was a regional chain with 12 modest storefronts fighting for market share against national retail giants. Over the next decade and a half, I built our commercial real estate portfolio from the ground up, negotiating, structuring, and securing 45 flagship store leases across prime metropolitan corridors from Atlanta to Chicago. Commercial real estate is not about glossy floor plans or interior design. It is about cold, unyielding legal paperwork, municipal zoning variances, triple net lease expense caps, escalation clauses, right of first refusal covenants, and estoppel certificates. Landlords are ruthless, municipal port authorities are bureaucratic, and prime retail space in major logistics hubs is scarce. If your lease agreement has a single loophole regarding common area maintenance overhead or structural maintenance indemnity, a commercial landlord will drain your operational margins dry. For 18 years, I was the human wall protecting Apex from those exact traps. I audited every property tax assessment, personally inspected structural foundations, and drafted custom lease assignments that gave Apex maximum operational flexibility. By the time I turned 52, our network of 45 high-revenue retail locations generated over $45 million in annual gross revenue. The cornerstone of our entire enterprise was the Gateway Commerce Park Complex, located right on the interstate logistics bypass. It was a monolithic 120,000 square foot facility, housing our corporate executive headquarters, our primary regional e-commerce fulfillment center, and our central automated inventory distribution warehouse. Every single product sold in our 45 retail stores passed through those shipping bays. Without Gateway Commerce Park, Apex Retail Group was nothing more than a collection of empty storefronts. However, very few people inside the company remembered how Gateway Commerce Park came to be. Back in 2011, Apex was aggressively expanding and desperately needed a centralized distribution hub. CEO Lawrence Croft had located the prime 20-acre parcel owned by the Municipal Port Authority, but Apex's corporate balance sheet was temporarily leveraged due to a rapid acquisition spree. The commercial bank refused to issue a loan for the land development unless the master ground lease was backed by a debt-free entity with substantial personal collateral. Lawrence Croft was panicked. He faced a 60-day deadline from the Port Authority to execute the 20-year master ground lease or lose the property to a competing national logistics firm. That was when I stepped in. I owned 3 fully paid-off commercial strip centers inherited from my family's estate, giving me a rock-solid personal credit profile and liquid capital reserve. I proposed a private structure. I formed Vance Holdings, LLC, a separate independent real estate management company. Vance Holdings executed the 20-year master ground lease directly with the Municipal Port Authority from 2008 to 2028. Then, Vance Holdings subleased the entire 120,000 square foot facility back to Apex Retail Group at a heavily discounted rate of $120,000 per month. Nearly 60% below prevailing commercial market rates for prime logistics space. Lawrence Croft was so relieved that he let my real estate attorney, Nathan Thorne, draft the master sublease agreement between Vance Holdings and Apex. Nathan included several standard protective covenants, but one clause in particular was non-negotiable for my personal financial protection. Section 14B, the Executive Continuity Covenant. Section 14B clearly stated that the discounted $120, the zero monthly rental rate, and the non-assignable occupancy license granted to Apex Retail Group were strictly contingent upon Gerald Vance maintaining full operational executive control over Apex's corporate real estate and facilities division. If Apex ever underwent a change in management control that unilaterally terminated Gerald Vance without cause or violated his executive authority, the master sublease would instantly terminate for material breach. Upon termination, occupancy rights would immediately revert to Vance Holdings LLC, and any continued occupation by Apex would trigger a mandatory FORS holdover penalty rent of 14M per month, accompanied by immediate statutory lockout rights under State Commercial Property Code, paragraph 535. For 15 years, that master lease agreement sat quietly in the municipal registry and in my personal legal safe. Lawrence Croft knew it existed, but as the company grew profitable, he focused on broad corporate expansion and let me run the property portfolio with total autonomy. Then came Julian Croft. Julian was Lawrence Croft's 36-year-old nephew. Fresh out of a prestigious business school with a freshly printed MBA and an unbearable sense of entitlement, Julian was brought in as the new chief operating officer 6 months ago. Lawrence was preparing for retirement and wanted to keep executive power inside the family. Despite Julian having zero practical experience in commercial real estate, logistics, or contract law, Julian didn't see 18 years of institutional knowledge when he looked at me. He saw an expensive line item on the annual balance sheet. As senior commercial real estate director, my compensation package was $300,000 base salary, plus a mandatory $450,000 18-year tenure completion bonus, along with a contractual 3% equity buyout right in all corporate real estate holdings, scheduled to vest on my 18th anniversary with the company, which was exactly 3 weeks away. Julian immediately began eyeing my contract. He brought in his college roommate's third-party property management firm, aiming to outsource our entire real estate division. Julian stood to earn a massive 6-figure performance kickback from the vendor switch, while saving the company my $450,000 severance package and wiping out my 3-2DM equity buyout threshold by terminating me for performance redundancy before the 3-week vesting window closed. Julian had no interest in reviewing historical lease agreements, titles, or municipal ground covenants. He assumed that's because Apex's corporate name was displayed in brushed aluminum letters on the side of the 120. 0-square-foot building Apex owned the ground it stood on. He thought I was just an aging employee who could be discarded with a stroke of a pen. The tension began building 3 months before my 18th anniversary. Julian started holding private executive meetings without inviting me. He began sending condescending emails questioning routine property management expenditures that had been approved under Lawrence Croft's administration for over a decade. "Gerald, why are we paying $14.00 monthly for specialized structural maintenance at the Gateway Hub?" Julian demanded during a department heads meeting in front of 20 senior executives. He leaned back in his leather chair, swirling an expensive espresso, looking around the table for approval. "My private audit team suggests we can replace your internal management team with an external vendor for less than half the cost. You've let operational costs balloon out of control because you're stuck in the old ways of doing things." I looked at the 28-year-old consultant sitting next to him, Julian's former fraternity brother, whose newly established management firm had zero experience handling high-volume commercial logistics hubs. "That $14 zeroes in structural maintenance budget covers specialized HVAC climate control for our high-density server room and heavy-duty hydraulic dock levelers," I replied evenly, keeping my voice measured. "Our shipping bays handle 60 heavy freight trucks every single day. If one of those hydraulic ramps fails during peak fulfillment season, our entire regional distribution halts. Furthermore, our master lease agreement requires certified industrial maintenance to maintain municipal safety compliance." Julian waved his hand dismissively. "The master lease is an internal detail, Gerald. Don't bore me with legal bureaucracy. Times have changed. Apex needs to be lean and agile, not weighed down by legacy executives with bloated salaries." Over the next 4 weeks, Julian aggressively chipped away at my authority. He unilaterally canceled our long-standing facility security contract, replacing our trusted corporate guards with an off-brand security company that answered directly to his office. He altered purchase order authorization thresholds, stripping me of signing power for property maintenance exceeding $5,000. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to provoke me into quitting. If I resigned voluntarily before my 18th anniversary, Apex would owe me zero severance pay and my 3% real estate equity buyout right, valued at 3.2M based on our current corporate property portfolio, would instantly evaporate. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I arrived at my office every morning at 7:30 a.m., executed my daily property audits, maintained flawless compliance documentation, and logged every single one of Julian's overreaching directives in a private digital ledger. The final trap was sprung on a rainy Friday morning, exactly 21 days before my equity vesting date. At 9 a.m., my desk phone rang. It was Julian's executive assistant, instructing me to report to the top-floor executive conference room immediately. When I stepped into the room, Julian was sitting at the head of the polished mahogany table. Next to him was the senior vice president of human resources, looking visibly uncomfortable and staring at the floor. In front of Julian lay a single manila folder containing a 3-page document. "Sit down, Gerald," Julian said, not even looking up from his tablet. I took a seat opposite him, resting my hands calmly on the conference table. "Good morning, Julian." "Let's skip the pleasantries," Julian said, pushing the document across the table toward me. "As part of our Q4 corporate optimization initiative, executive leadership has conducted a comprehensive review of our facilities division. We have determined that your role as senior commercial real estate director is redundant. Effective immediately at 12 p.m. today, your position is eliminated." I looked down at the document. It was a formal notice of executive termination. "I see," I said softly, scanning the lines. "And what about the contractual 18-year severance clause of $450,000, as well as the equity buyout provision?" Julian let out a cold, sharp laugh. "Read paragraph 4, Gerald. Your termination is classified under operational efficiency restructuring and failure to adopt modern corporate governance standards. Under corporate bylaws modified by the board last month, restructuring dismissals do not qualify for tenure bonuses or equity vesting. You leave with 2 weeks of accrued paid time off, and that's it." He leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table and smirking directly at me. "You've been leeching a $300,000 salary off this company for years, Gerald. You thought you were going to coast into a $3.2 million equity payout in 3 weeks? Not on my watch. The board accepted my recommendation this morning. Effective noon today, your security clearance is revoked." The vice president of human resources kept her eyes fixed on her lap, clearly aware of the blatant illegality of the move, but too terrified of losing her own job to speak up. I didn't yell. I didn't slam my fist on the table. I didn't threaten a wrongful termination lawsuit. In corporate real estate, emotion is an amateur's flaw. Leverage is everything. I pulled a classic Mont Blanc pen from my jacket pocket, uncapped it, and signed the acknowledgement line at the bottom of the termination letter. Then, I slid the document back to Julian. "Make sure you sign and date the corporate copy as Chief Operating Officer, Julian," I said calmly. "I need your official signature confirming that Apex Retail Group has unilaterally ended my executive employment without my consent, effective immediately at noon." Julian grinned arrogantly, picking up a pen and signing his name with a flamboyant flourish. "Gladly, Gerald. Now hand over your master building keycards. Clear your personal belongings from your desk by 12 p.m. and have security escort you off the premises." "Understood," I said. I picked up my signed copy of the termination notice, stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out of the conference room. Back in my office, I spent 2 hours neatly packing my personal framed certificates, my family photographs, and my personal legal files into 2 cardboard boxes. At 11:55 a.m., 2 junior security guards hired by Julian's new vendor appeared at my door, looking nervous. "We're sorry, Mr. Vance," one of them mumbled. "Mr. Croft instructed us to accompany you to your vehicle." "No need to apologize. Gentlemen," I smiled warmly, "you're just doing your jobs." I carried my boxes out to my sedan, placed them in the trunk, and sat in the driver's seat. As I drove past the security gate of Gateway Commerce Park, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved for 15 years. Nathan Thorne answered on the second ring. "Gerald? Did he do it?" Julian just signed the unilateral executive termination notice, I replied, watching the 120, 0 square foot facility disappear in my rearview mirror. He voided my severance and canceled my equity vesting. Nathan chuckled softly over the phone line. The arrogant idiot actually signed it? Excellent. I'll have the notice of master lease default and possession demand served on his desk before the end of the day. By 1:30 p.m. on Friday, I was sitting in the corner office of Thorne and Associates law firm in downtown, drinking black coffee across from Nathan Thorne. Nathan was a 58-year-old veteran commercial real estate attorney who had spent 30 years dissecting corporate contracts and land titles. Laid out on his wide oak desk were 3 pristine leather-bound binders containing the original 2008 municipal deeds, the master ground lease with the Port Authority, and the 2011 sublease agreement signed by Lawrence Croft on behalf of Apex Retail Group. Let's review the exact legal framework, Gerald, Nathan said, sliding his spectacles down his nose and opening Binder 2 to Section 14B. Julian Croft thought he was firing a middle manager. He had no idea he was triggering a structural land asset default. Nathan pointed to Section 14B, Subsection 1. Executive Continuity Covenant. Under Subsection 1, Nathan explained, Vance Holdings LLC leased the 120,000 square foot facility at Gateway Commerce Park to Apex Retail Group at the heavily subsidized rate of $120, zero per month, nearly $230,000 below market value. The explicit legal consideration for this discount was your continued employment as senior real estate director, ensuring that the property was managed according to Vance Holdings' strict compliance standards. Nathan flipped to Subsection 2, Material Default and Automatic Revocation. Subsection 2 states that if Apex Retail Group unilaterally terminates Gerald Vance's executive employment or strips him of property authority, the master sublease immediately enters an uncurable event of default. The discounted sublease is terminated as a matter of law, and all occupancy rights automatically revert to Vance Holdings LLC within 48 hours of notice. Finally, Nathan tapped his finger on Subsection 3, Holdover Penalty and Statutory Lockout. Subsection 3 is the killer clause. Nathan smiled grimly. If Apex fails to vacate the 120,000 square foot property within 48 hours of receiving the notice of default, Apex becomes a illegal holdover trespasser under State Commercial Property Code, paragraph 535. The contract mandates an immediate holdover rent multiplier of 4x prevailing commercial market rates, which calculates out to exactly 1.4M per month, or $46,666 per day, plus the sublandlord's absolute statutory right to execute a physical possessory lockout of the premises. What about the Port Authority ground title, I asked. I called the Port Authority legal counsel at noon. Nathan replied, pulling out a stamped municipal letter. The Port Authority recognizes Vance Holdings LLC as the sole master lessee of the land through 2028. Apex Retail Group has no direct contract with the city or the Port Authority. Their rights exist solely through your sublease. Once your sublease defaults, Apex has zero legal standing to step foot on that property. By 4 p.m. on Friday, Nathan's senior process server drove to Apex Retail Group's corporate office. He walked up to the executive suite and personally handed a thick white envelope marked asterisk, Farmal Noter of Master Lease Def, immediate termination of occupancy license and demon to vacate, directly to Julian Croft's executive assistant, while mailing a certified copy to CEO Lawrence Croft's home address. Julian's reaction was textbook arrogance. According to an email leaked to me later by an HR staffer, Julian glanced at the legal notice, scoffed, and tossed it straight into his wastebasket. He sent a brief text to his college buddy's property management team. Our fired ex-director is trying to scare us with an old lease technicality. Ignore it. Business as usual on Monday. He didn't bother consulting corporate legal counsel. He didn't check the municipal land records. In his mind, he was the chief operating officer of a $45 million company, and a former employee had no power to stop him. He was dead wrong. While Julian was celebrating over Friday evening cocktails, Nathan Thorne and I were finalizing our enforcement strategy. Under State Commercial Property Code, paragraph 535, A commercial landlord enforcing a valid master lease default after a 48-hour notice period does not need a lengthy court trial to physically secure a commercial warehouse. They simply need to exercise their statutory right of re-entry in the presence of law enforcement officers once the notice period expires. Because the notice was served at 4:30 p.m. on Friday, the 48-hour grace period expired precisely at 4:30 p.m. on Sunday. On Saturday morning, I formally notified the local electric and water utility companies that Vance Holdings LLC was modifying the master account credentials for the 120,000 square foot facility. Next, I called our commercial property insurance underwriters, informing them that Apex Master Sublease had defaulted due to breach of Section 14B. The insurance carrier immediately issued a formal notice suspending property liability coverage for Apex's operations inside the building effective midnight Sunday, stating that any unpermitted corporate activity on the site would be completely uninsured. On Sunday afternoon, Nathan Thorne met with the county sheriff's commercial enforcement division. He presented the certified Port Authority ground title deeds, Vance Holdings LLC registration, the original master sublease with Section 14B, the signed termination letter bearing Julian Croft's signature, and the process server's affidavit of service. The sheriff's legal deputy reviewed the documents for 20 minutes, verified the municipal port authority seals, and stamped the enforcement order. "Everything is lock-tight, Mr. Vance," the deputy said, handing back the files. "We will have 3 marked sheriff units on site at 5:30 a.m. tomorrow morning to oversee the commercial lockout and ensure peaceable enforcement." I went to bed early on Sunday night. For 18 years, I had worked 60-hour weeks keeping Apex's operations running smoothly. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I slept like a baby, knowing that by sunrise, Julian Croft's fragile world was about to collide with unyielding commercial law. At 5:30 a.m. on Monday morning, while the sky was still dark, 2 black SUVs and 3 marked county sheriff patrol cars pulled up to the security entrance of Gateway Commerce Park. I stepped out of the lead vehicle alongside Nathan Thorne and a 4-man team of licensed commercial locksmiths. The 2 security guards hired by Julian's vendor were sitting in the guard booth, sipping coffee. When they saw 3 armed sheriff deputies approach the gate, they nearly dropped their cups. "Good morning, fellas," the lead deputy said calmly, presenting the stamped judicial lockout order. "Vance Holdings LLC is taking legal possession of this property pursuant to State Commercial Code. Paragraph 535. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal belongings and clear the premises." The security guards didn't argue. They packed their gear and left immediately. Over the next 90 minutes, our locksmith team went to work. They replaced the heavy electronic lock cylinders on the main security gates, the automated loading dock access doors, the executive lobby entrance, and the main server facility. On every glass door, loading bay, and entry gate, our team posted large fluorescent orange legal signs, * notice of commercial possessory lockout. This property is under the excuse legal possession of Vance Holdings LC. Any unmagistery constitutes criminal trespass pursuant to State Stat 535. By 6:30 a.m., the morning logistics rush began. The first long-haul semi-truck carrying $200,000 worth of imported electronics pulled up to the main gate. Finding the gate locked and barred with heavy steel chains, the driver pulled off onto the shoulder. Within an hour, 45 massive freight trucks, carrying over $12.5 million in seasonal holiday inventory destined for our 45 retail stores nationwide, were lined up for nearly a mile along the interstate bypass road. At 7:30 a.m., the first wave of corporate headquarters staff arrived. Over 200 executive employees, IT specialists, accountants, and customer support representatives pulled into the parking area, only to be stopped by sheriff deputies stationed at the perimeter. "The building is locked down under a commercial lease default," the deputy announced through a megaphone. "All non-essential personnel are instructed to return home until further notice." At 8:15 a.m., Julian Croft arrived in his brand-new European sports car. He took one look at the mile-long line of idling freight trucks, the crowd of 200 stranded employees, and the marked police cruisers blocking the entrance, and his face turned red with rage. He slammed his car door and marched up to the sheriff deputy at the main gate. "What the hell is going on here?" Julian screamed, his voice cracking with fury. "I am the chief operating officer of Apex Retail Group. This is my building. Remove these chains and get these police cars off my property immediately." The lead deputy didn't flinch. He slowly pulled out a clipboard containing the stamped Port Authority title and Section 14B of the sublease agreement. "Mr. Croft," the deputy said coldly, "this property is owned by the Municipal Port Authority and master leased to Vance Holdings, LLC. As of 4:30 p.m. yesterday, your company's sublease was lawfully terminated due to material default. You are currently standing on private property leased by Mr. Gerald Vance. If you step past this yellow security line, I will arrest you for criminal trespass." "This is insane," Julian shrieked, waving his arms wildly. "Gerald Vance was fired on Friday. He's a former employee. He has no rights here." "You signed the termination letter yourself, Mr. Croft," the deputy replied, pointing to Julian's signature on the document attached to the police file. "Your signature activated Section 14B. Now step back." Just then, Julian's phone began ringing violently. It was Lawrence Croft, the CEO. Lawrence had just been bombarded with panic calls from regional store managers across the country, reporting that morning inventory deliveries had failed to arrive. Worse, the national freight carrier companies were threatening to assess $250,000 in daily demurrage fines for holding 45 delivery trucks idle on the highway. "Julian," Lawrence roared over the phone, so loud that even the sheriff deputies could hear him. "Why are our regional store managers telling me our central distribution hub is locked down by police? What did you do?" "Uncle Lawrence, calm down," Julian stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "It's just Gerald. He's pulling a stunt with some old lease agreement." "A stunt?" Lawrence shouted. "The board of directors just got a notice from the Municipal Port Authority. They're enforcing a zero-occupancy mandate. We have $12 million of holiday inventory sitting in trucks on the highway. If those trucks don't unload by noon, our entire Q4 supply chain collapses. Fix this right now." Julian frantically tried dialing my personal cell phone. I watched his name flash on my screen from the comfort of Nathan Thorne's conference room 4 miles away. I let it ring. He called 6 times in 10 minutes, leaving increasingly panicked voicemails that shifted from furious threats of lawsuits to desperate pleas for a meeting. At 10 a.m., Lawrence Croft called Nathan Thorne directly. "Nathan," Lawrence begged, his voice trembling, "please tell me Gerald is with you. We need to resolve this right now. The company is losing $100,000 an hour." Nathan looked across the desk at me. I gave him a calm nod. "We will agree to an emergency conference at my office at 1 p.m. today, Lawrence," Nathan said sternly, "on 2 strict conditions. First, you must bring the chairman of the board. Second, Julian Croft must attend in person, and he will remain silent while Gerald dictates the terms." "Done," Lawrence exhaled with overwhelming relief. "We'll be there." At 1 p.m. on Monday, the executive conference room at Thorne & Associates was filled with suffocating tension. On one side of the solid oak table sat CEO Lawrence Croft, chairman of the board Victor Langford, and COO Julian Croft. Julian looked pale and hollowed out, his former arrogant posture replaced by slumping shoulders and nervous sweat. On our side sat Nathan Thorne and myself, calm and composed behind a neat stack of legal documents. "Gerald," Lawrence began, his voice raspy and weary, "we've known each other for 18 years. You helped build this company. We need to get our flagship distribution center open immediately. The board is prepared to offer you an apology and reinstate your position as real estate director." I shook my head slowly. "I have no interest in coming back to Apex, Lawrence. The corporate culture under your nephew's leadership has made it clear how little loyalty 18 years of dedicated service commands. We are here today to discuss a formal structural settlement." Nathan Thorne slid a 4-page document across the table to board chairman Victor Langford. "Here are our non-negotiable settlement terms," Nathan stated in a crisp, professional tone. "If these terms are executed and paid in full by 4 p.m. today, Vance Holdings LLC will execute a complete assignment of the master ground lease to Apex Retail Group, allowing you to resume full operations at Gateway Commerce Park." Victor Langford put on his reading glasses and scanned the numbers line by line. First, Nathan itemized, Apex will pay the full contractually owed 18-year tenure severance bonus of $450,000. Second, Apex will execute an immediate cash buyout of Gerald Vance's vested 3% real estate equity share at the certified appraisal valuation of $3,200,000. Third, Vance Holdings LLC requires a master lease transfer premium of $800, zeroed to assign our municipal port ground rights directly to Apex Retail Group. Fourth, Apex will pay the single-day holdover rent penalty of 46,666 cents. Julian gasped, jumping out of his chair. $5.45 million? He shrieked, pointing an unstable finger at me. This is financial extortion. Uncle Lawrence, you can't agree to this. We can sue him in federal court. Chairman Victor Langford slammed his palm onto the conference table so hard that the water glasses rattled. Shut your mouth, Julian, Victor roared, his eyes blazing with fury. You lied to the board. You told us Gerald was an overpaid director whose dismissal would save the company money. You didn't even bother reviewing the master title deeds for our primary distribution facility. Your reckless ignorance and cheap greed have paralyzed 45 retail stores, cost us over $1 million in supply chain delays, and put our entire $45 million enterprise on the brink of bankruptcy. Victor turned his head and glared at Lawrence. Lawrence, if your nephew doesn't hand in his resignation within 5 minutes, the board will hold an emergency vote to strip you of your CEO position as well. Julian collapsed back into his chair, his face completely drained of blood. He pulled a pen with trembling fingers and scribbled his resignation on a piece of notepad paper, sliding it to Victor. Your resignation is accepted, Victor said coldly. Security is waiting downstairs to escort you from the building. Get out. Julian stood up, avoided looking anyone in the eye, and shuffled out of the room like a defeated ghost. Once the door clicked shut, Chairman Victor Langford looked back across the table at me. Gerald, Victor said, his tone turning respectful, you drafted a brilliant master sublease agreement 15 years ago. You protected your asset, and you caught us completely exposed. The terms are steep, but they are legally sound. The board authorizes the settlement. At 3:30 p.m., Nathan Thorne received an electronic notification from our escrow bank. The wire transfer of exactly $5,450,000 from Apex Retail Group had cleared and posted to Vance Holdings' master account. I picked up my pen and signed the formal master lease assignment agreement, transferring the Gateway Commerce Park car ground rights over to Apex Retail Group. Then, I handed the master set of physical building keycards to Lawrence Croft. It was a pleasure doing business with you, Lawrence, I said, shaking his hand. I wish Apex the best of luck with its new management. At 3:55 p.m., Nathan Thorne placed a call to the county sheriff deputies stationed at Gateway Commerce Park. The heavy steel lockout chains were removed, the main security gates swung open, and 45 freight semi-trucks rolled into the shipping bays to unload their cargo. 3 months later, I sat on the back patio of my waterfront home, watching the afternoon sun reflect off the bay while sipping a glass of iced tea. My $5.45 million settlement was cleanly invested across a diversified portfolio of high-yield commercial triple-net properties, generating a steady, stress-free annual income that far exceeded my former executive's salary. Apex Retail Group managed to survive the holiday season, but without my 18 years of real estate expertise, they struggled to navigate complex lease renewals in major markets. As for Julian Croft, news travels fast in commercial real estate circles. His catastrophic blunder at Apex became an industry legend, and no major corporate firm would hire him for an executive role again. In corporate America, executives like Julian think power comes from titles, corner offices, and aggressive corporate posturing. But true power comes from reading the fine print, securing your legal foundation, and knowing exactly when to pull the kill switch.